We expect March CPI headline inflation to be extraordinarily elevated due to Putin's price hike. And we expect a large difference between core and headline inflation, reflecting the global disruptions in energy and food markets. So core inflation doesn't include energy and food prices. Headline inflation does.
Well, the White House continuing to blame Vladimir Putin for inflation in the U.S. But take a look at this chart. Prices actually began rising the day President Biden was elected. Here to talk about is Kevin Hassett, former chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors and author of The Drift, Stopping America's Slide to Socialism. Great to see you, Kevin. There's a picture of your book. That's the most important thing about this interview.
Sure.
First of all, what do you make of the White House itself forecasting tomorrow's numbers?
I'm very, very stunned and upset, frankly, that Jen Psaki would come out and say what she did today. It's basically a very standard rule in the White House that you don't talk about numbers the day before they come out. And that rule is in place for a very specific reason. The White House gets the numbers a day before everybody else. And there are very, very few people, the Secretary of Treasury, the President, the Federal Reserve Chairman, and the Chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, who are allowed to know that number. And so the fact that it appears that the press secretary knows that tomorrow's number is going to be really terrible, is very disturbing. And it could be that they've just done the math, which, you and I have been doing for a while, right? I said 10% inflation about 5 months ago. But perhaps they just did the math. But this is really shocking and unprecedented.
Well, sometimes they just listen
talking about the number a day before.
Sometimes they just listen to the wrong people. I mean, that's what happened with remember the unemployment figure that they got so terribly wrong a couple of months ago. They did the same thing. They forecasted it about a full week ahead. But to the substance of what she was saying, if there is much substance there, the idea of the Putin price hike, I mean, just naming it, everybody knows. I mean, you can put that chart back up on the screen there. We saw the prices jump not just after President Biden was inaugurated, but right after he was elected. The prices began to jump because people realized what was going to happen. So this had nothing to do with Putin, that first spike there that you see the first 6 months of the Biden administration.
Right. What they've been doing is they've been mailing checks to people and printing money. And every, very, very first year high school textbook, frankly, will tell you, economics textbook, will tell you that if you do that, then you get runaway inflation. We now have runaway inflation, and they're trying to blame it on Vladimir Putin. Now, Vladimir Putin is a terrible, awful human that'll go down in history as one of the worst people of the 21st century, I'm sure, but he's not the reason that inflation is out of control. And the reason why that line of argument is disturbing to me, in addition to, basically front-running the number, is that it shows that they don't understand the problem. And until the White House understands the problem and starts to do things to stimulate supply and make it so supply can keep up with demand and maybe prices then won't rise so high, then inflation is going to continue to spin out of control no matter what the Federal Reserve does. And if you look at their Build Back Better proposal, it shows that they don't really understand how they created this inflation. And what Jen Psaki said today, basically just magnified that point.
Well, they continue to live in this bubble environment where what happens at the supermarket, what happens at the gas station clearly doesn't affect them. I mean, for example, in November, I'm going to bring myself into the picture here because I took a picture of a gas station on November 7th, 4 days after the election, the 2020 election. It showed gas at $2. You can barely see it there, but the top line number, the unleaded regular, was $2.01 a gallon. Now, I took that picture because I knew that a man who talked about a war that he had on fossil fuels had been elected president and was going to direct policy towards that idea, which means tremendously lowering the supply of domestic production of oil, which would lead to higher gas prices. If I knew it, I know a lot of oil traders knew it as well. That's why prices began to rise, not just after the inauguration, but after his election.
Right, like Biden has waged a war on fossil fuels, and as far as I know, that's the only war that he's won since he's been in office, and he's way ahead of that war. But, the fact is that they also are telling us, well, the core isn't so bad, which is the part of the consumer price index that takes out fuel and takes out food. But you and I know that fuel and food are kind of
Yes.
the most important things in everybody's budget.
Yeah.
And if those things are going up at a better than 10% a year, the reason why that makes people worse off is that wages are not advancing that quickly. Right now, the latest wage indicators suggest that wages are going up by about 5%. And so what that means is that real wages, real incomes are declining. And that's why Secretary Yellen was out warning about a recession. Frankly, I think that I agree with her. I think that it could be that we're going to start a recession sometime in the second quarter because incomes are not keeping up.
Well,
with that inflation.
she talked about, quote, enormous economic repercussions from the war in Russia. But she said that because she was kind of setting up Russia to blame for any recession that we do get. I mean, they're blaming the gas prices on Russia. They're blaming oil prices on Russia, and now it looks like they may be forecasting a recession, blaming that on Russia before it happens. Do you think the public's going to buy any of it?
Well, the thing that I find most interesting is that the Democrats are perpetually in a state of blame. And so you might recall that President Obama, for about 6 years, blamed President Bush for everything that went wrong. And then the economy was very, very weak at the end of the Obama term. And then they came up with this idea of secular stagnation. So it's just like, it's not us, it's just the way the world is. And so now we've got Putin and gosh knows what else. But, if a party that's running the economy is constantly blaming someone else for the problem, then, maybe you as a voter should start to think, hey, maybe they're causing the problem instead.
I think a lot of voters are thinking exactly. I know independents, more and more independents are, but even a lot of Democrats are beginning to wonder about that. Kevin, great to see you. Thank you very much for being here. Appreciate it.
Great to see you too.